So, welcome to Social Impact Storytelling and this Mentor Monday session. Looking forward to hearing all the tips that Mufus has to share with us today. I want to start by doing a land acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather has been and still is the traditional territory of several Indigenous nations, including the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Wendat, the Métis, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Since time immemorial, numerous Indigenous nations and Indigenous people have lived and passed through this territory. We recognize that this territory is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Treaty and the Two-Row Wampum Treaty, which emphasizes the importance of joint stewardship, peace, and respectful relationships. Sheridan affirms that it is our collective responsibility to honor and respect those who have gone before us, those who are here, and those who have yet to come. We are grateful for the opportunity to be working and living on this land. So for those of you who are familiar with EDGE, you'll know that we're all about entrepreneurship and in particular social impact entrepreneurship. And what we do is work to strengthen the regional innovation ecosystem through collaboration and impact entrepreneurship expertise. We provide inclusive support to impact entrepreneurs. We offer mentorship, learning programs, co-working space when we're open, not during COVID. And we offer access to some funding sources. We connect entrepreneurs to Sheridan talent, expertise, and resources in the form of workshops, in the form of marketing supports, and through our mentors as well. So that's what we're about. We offer 3 separate incubation programs. Our Explore program, which is for our students who are, and anyone else who is curious about entrepreneurship or change making, to boost their creativity and to tinker with different ideas. Our LEAP program is to help people who actually want to found businesses and work on developing their business model, figure out their revenue model, and try to launch a company. And then we have our RISE program, which is where people are growing their companies, where we're working to get to first revenue and beyond, and building a sustainable business. So we're really pretty much all about entrepreneurship, from just exploring the idea through to actually building and strengthening an opportunity to grow a venture. And so tonight we're going to be talking a little bit about storytelling and how important that is in building your brand as a founder of a company, telling your story, particularly if you're running a social enterprise or a social impact organization, how important it is to be able to tell the story in a way that is powerful, that gets people engaged and on side with your venture. And so pretty excited to have Mufus Chowdhury here from Candy Box Marketing. He's the brand manager there, and he's well known in his own right, separate and apart from that organization. He has his roots at Sheridan. So Mufus, really glad to have you here with us tonight.
Lisa, thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute honor being back to assist any initiative that is around the vicinity of Sheridan. It's very close to me, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. I'm a fellow colleague to some of you that are here. We might have worked in the past in different areas, but it was really exciting actually for me to see EDGE come together from day one. I remember when the ideas were being discussed in some of the boardrooms that we had at the campus to what it is today. So I'm extremely thrilled to be here to support in any way that I can.
So tell us about you and the background you have and the work that you do in brand development, first of all.
Yeah, so I really appreciate the great introduction. The brand manager side that I'm heavily involved with Candy Box, I can officially say that I've been part of the agency for an entire decade, which is crazy. I've never in my life been able to say I'm part of a decade for something, and I finally can. So it's a bragging right on its own. But what's been more fun than anything else is the fact that during the decade I've been able to work with hundreds and hundreds of businesses, and it's constantly been the same challenge over and over again, which is brands are trying to figure out how to be heard in a very, very noisy digital environment. You think about not only how many competitors are there, but how many of them are really flooding the social space that we have out there. And when it comes to making an impact and really being able to reach out to your audience in a specific way, I've become a big fan in helping these brands tell their story. And what's really exciting for me, Lisa, is that the areas that I learn and the skill sets that I pick up from the agency life, it doesn't end at the agency life. In many ways, I think of Candy Box marketing as my digital gym that I get to work out and improve my skill set, and then take it out into the world and do whatever I can with it. So as a result of spending so much time and seeing what works for our clients, I've been taking that out, and I started doing my own initiatives, such as speaking and delivering keynotes across North America. I've been doing about 30 a year now. And on top of that, I've started a podcast show called Ride With Me and produced 3 seasons. And I've also published a book around conversations of personal development. And I can tell you with every fiber in my body that the success of those 4 pillars, if there's one thing in common, it's always been about telling great stories, which is why it's become the forefront of my conversation.
You do it so well. What is the secret to a great story?
Very good question, first and foremost. I think in many ways, it's first and foremost respecting the audience. And I can't tell you how much that part gets ignored. A big part of speaking with any type of group is what is very heavily underrated is that kickoff meeting that you have before an event or before a client or a client execution, and really just actually understanding the landscape that you're playing with. You and I actually talked a lot about what we're trying to achieve with this initiative before I even showed up here today. And I spent a lot of time pontificating around that and thinking about how can I provide the most value. I think the more you understand where the pain points of your audience members are, be it in business, be it in speaking on stage or any other type of medium, the better you can figure out where to spend most of your attention speaking towards. And that's something that I've been working on. But if you really, really want to get into the grassroots of how much of a student of storytelling I am, let me take you back to when I used to run into a Radio Shack and buy myself an audio recorder, if it, with AA batteries, if just to show you how back in the days it used to be. And what I used to do, Lisa, is I used to go out to events and I would actually place the audio recorder on the podium, and I would hit record, and then I would deliver my presentation. And what I would find myself doing, very much inspired by the greats like Kobe Bryant, who would watch the tape after one of his games, I would go back and I would instantly upload my talk onto a computer and listen to it. And not only listen to what I'm saying and how I'm saying it, but listening to how the audience is responding to it. And this comes back to respecting the audience, is really picking up what resonated with them and what hit the best, and holding on to those parts while eliminating the fluff that maybe didn't hit as well. So over the years of grooming that experience, I would say I've become a lot better than I used to be 10 years ago.
Wow, that's a lot of self-reflection. It sounds painful.
It's definitely not fun and definitely not the sexiest topic to talk about. But if you really, really want to get into it, that's the grunt work never goes away. Sometimes people see the presentation, but the preparation is far more important than that. The presentation is just the final deliverables of everything you put together leading up into that day.
You have the advantage of being, or at least let's say you've created the advantage of being out in front a lot, in front of audiences. And you've probably, when you look back at some of the stuff you did originally, it probably isn't the tone that you have today, if you're anything like me. But for many of our founders, for our entrepreneurs, they're often, at the big game, very early in the stage. What's important for them right now is to make that awesome pitch for their business right now to raise that funding that's critical to them at this moment in time. Any tips?
I would start by thinking about what you're most comfortable with, because the beautiful thing about how we live today is that you don't have to subscribe of one way of storytelling. There's many mediums that you could use to get there. I, believe it or not, am an extremely shy introvert, like ridiculously shy. Lisa, I don't know if you know this, but 10 years ago, when I first joined Candy Box as an intern, I remember the CEO, Daryl, and myself, which was the only 2 employees of Candy Box once upon a time, we went to an event, and Daryl was the speaker of an event that you may recognize, which was a constant contact event. And you just happened to be one of the speakers. I remember you. And I remember sitting in the crowd watching my CEO and watching you deliver phenomenal talks. And I'm sitting back there thinking, there's no way in a million years I could be able to do that, because it terrified me even around the idea of getting in front of a room of that many people and delivering a talk. But what happens over time is that you realize that the mission is more important than the feelings that you get. The mission is more important than your anxiety. And when you start realizing that, you start putting yourself out there in ways that you wouldn't have before. But the beautiful thing is you can work your way into it. You don't have to just jump overnight. And it started with me thinking about, how do I want to present myself? You know, I started with just written word, and I used to just storytell through blog writing. And I used to just put out articles out there sharing my insights, my takeaways. I used to go out to events like your constant contact event and write reflections on it through blog articles. So that was my way of initially communicating, which I have to say is a very healthy way even today of storytelling. You get great search engine optimization, great readability. It's easy to share with the world. It's evergreen, meaning people can come back and find it many years later and still gain value from it. There's a lot of value of doing written word storytelling. But after a while, you just get put into opportunities where you can verbalize a lot of the things that you wrote down. So I transitioned from writing into audio, into speaking on stage. But I got to tell you, I'm still not comfortable with being on video. I know that there's a great opportunity of getting on YouTube and doing great things. I just chose not to participate out of my level of anxiety around that. However, I'm still generating great results, which means there isn't just one way to get your story out there. There are several paths to the Holy Grail, and you just need to figure out what makes the most sense for you. And over time, your mission will become large enough to give you plenty more opportunities to do so.
It's true. It's funny that you say that you're so introverted, because I'm the same. And yet, same feeling as you, just the purpose, my passion for supporting entrepreneurs has always pushed me out of my comfort zone. Um, and and now I wouldn't think twice about it, because I'm more about who's in the audience. So okay, I come onto the call. We had some tech difficulties at the beginning of the call. That stresses me out quite a lot because, you know, for many reasons, partly because I just want it to go well, and partly that I want the experience for people on the other end of the call to be really great. So it's about them so much more now than it is about me. So if you could find your way to make that the path early, the earlier you can do that, the stronger your story, it seems.
Yes, yes. And what you said there about the Zoom hiccup is actually a really, really important point, which is the world that we live in right now, especially with the pandemic lockdown causing us to communicate in different ways and do events that are far more virtual. This is actually the great opportunity of an entry level storyteller, because the expectation of delivering a phenomenal, high quality, on stage, all the tech working the way it's supposed to is not right now the priority. The world is a lot more empathetic to hiccups and tech issues than they've ever been, which is why you can make these mistakes and actually get your foot into the door. I think about like the greatest talk show hosts in the world and what they were doing in the lockdown. You think of Jimmy Fallon, which is one of the highest paid individual in television history. And you look at how he was communicating and facilitating his show during the lockdown period. And he just had a camera set up in the living room, sitting in his couch, speaking, and he was getting anywhere from 14 million to 20 million views. And what they did that we see the TV studio productions do all the time is, in many ways, these talk shows are setting the foundation of what the ceiling and the floor is for what a high quality production looks like. And the fact that he took it to his living room, it actually made anyone that is willing to turn on their camera or their microphone play in the same level playing field as Jimmy Fallon. I think that's just
Which is awesome.
Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah. So back to the elements of a good story. Somebody has a lot of our members, certainly the entrepreneurs, the change makers within our community, they often have something very powerful that they're trying to do to impact the world in a significant way. But sometimes it's hard to articulate that. Can you give us some tips on how to take something that's fairly complex and distill it down?
I'm going to start with this. I think one of the biggest myths that I see that prevents people from sharing their stories is that there's a lot of people that just feel like they haven't lived an extravagant life. And because of that, they feel like they haven't earned the right to share their story. And I want to kill that myth right off the bat. And please take it from someone who has literally dedicated his career to help others tell their story. I promise you that every single one of you on this call, and as a matter of fact, any single person in the world has a story that someone else can benefit from. If you get that mindset right, it's going to help with a lot of the next steps that I'm about to share. So first and foremost, just know that no matter what type of life you've lived and no matter how you think of it, there's a lot of stories you can pull out of it. The second thing I want you to think about is trying to pull out the right stories from you. So, allow me to ask you a few questions here that I think is going to make you instantly start thinking of stories and maybe even prove my point. That's every single one of
Sure.
us has a story. There are different types of stories. The first one I think about is inspiration stories. And when I think of inspiration stories, some questions that every single one of you could ask yourself is, number one, who are your biggest inspirations? Number two, what movies, books, or experiences has inspired you? And number three, which brings it all together, what were you able to accomplish because of those inspirations? And when you think about it, it naturally forces you to kind of put some stories down on paper. You're thinking about how you took those inspos and you turned it into something that you were able to achieve. The second one I think about is highlight stories. And highlight stories, some questions that are worth asking is, what is an achievement you are proud of? So take a moment to think of that. Maybe you bought your first home, your first car, found the love of your life, found your dream job, was able to close that deal, was able to make a perfect pitch, whatever that is. Think of that achievement that you're really proud of. Then ask yourself, how were you able to achieve this? And my most favorite question, which is, what had to go wrong for you to achieve that achievement? When you think about what had to go wrong to achieve that achievement, it really gets dramatic, which leads me to my last one, which is failure stories. And to put down failure stories, I implore you to think about the following three questions. Number one, what have you learned from your failures that you had in your life? Number two, how did you avoid repeating those failures? And then finally, how did they change you as a person? I promise you, it is impossible to answer those questions without dropping at least one story in the equation of the way that I structured those. And what happens when you start answering these questions is you realize that you're starting to build a palette of stories that you can pick and choose from depending on who your audience is, which goes back to the very first answer that I gave, which is respect your audience. When you think about who you're communicating with, you can decide what to bring in. I got brought in today to talk about storytelling. I also do an entire keynote on personal development. I do it on social media marketing. I just know that those stories are not as important as the ones that I'm sharing today. So when you start having an arsenal of stories that you can bring into battle, you can really choose your weapon depending on who you're communicating with.
I love it. Sorry, Maheshi is asking, could you repeat that formula, please? Give it to us again. You went real fast.
Oh, okay. So the questions, I suppose, is what you're asking. So there's inspo stories, inspiration, highlight stories, and failure stories. I'm going to go very quickly, but there's a recording, so you can always watch this if you need to. Inspiration stories, you're asking yourself, who are your biggest inspirations? What movies, books, or experiences inspired you? And what were you able to accomplish because of those inspirations? Number two, highlight stories. What is an achievement that you're really proud of? How were you able to achieve it? And the most important one, what had to go wrong for you to achieve that achievement? And then finally, number three, what have you learned from these failures? How were you able to avoid repeating those failures? And then finally, how did those failures change you as a person? By being able to do all those, you're able to bring that together in order to structure the stories that you can bring out to the market. When you think about impact stories starts with relatability. If someone can relate with your story, you can go a long way. I came in here, and this was a true story, that I did meet Lisa many years ago, and I was freaked out by the ability to speak in front of a crowd. But you know what it also does? There's a lot of other shy people that says, me too. And there's a lot of people that are picturing themselves in my shoes, and they know how terrifying it is. So the relatability piece is big. So I encourage you, from those stories that you're writing down, think about how you can bring out the pieces that people can relate to. And over time, you'll find that you're able to create a deeper connection with them.
I love it. So now I'm curious. Tell us one of your failure stories.
Oh my gosh, where do I start? I think if I have anything, I have failure stories. And my failure stories actually results in why I do what I do with impact stories. First and foremost, the biggest failure story that is very, very melodramatic was the fact that I actually got put on academic probation while I was in University of Toronto because I wasn't doing very good at school. I was just not someone that had my passion figured out. So I was just kind of floating into school, hoping that I could graduate with my friends with no purpose in life. And because of that, I wasn't doing very well. But the worst part, being the shy introvert, is that I was sitting in a room full of 500 students every single day, just praying that someone would recognize that I'm not doing well and come offer me help rather than me raise my hand and ask for help. So I sat there every day in pain, hoping for assistance, and it never happened. And I ended up getting kicked out of school, $30,000 in debt, and it just made me feel at my lowest low. But I can tell you, when I talk about what is the biggest achievement I achieved because of my failures, I can tell you my entire career on speaking on stage, podcasting, and writing books has come back to the fact that that experience in my life has left a chip in my shoulder. I realize now that I've become far more confident and a better communicator. I always think that when I'm on stage, that there's another younger Mufus out there that is feeling the same way, that won't raise up their hand, that won't use this chat today, but they want to benefit from the same story. So my message has come out of that experience, and I couldn't be more grateful that I went through it.
So one of those situations where your greatest challenge becomes your greatest blessing.
And the worst feeling is you just don't know it while you're going through it. You just hope that you come out better because of it. And I think that this is the other beautiful thing about storytelling is whenever you're telling stories, I think of it like a digital flare gun. You're shooting out a big sign into the sky every time I post a story out there, and I'm letting the world know that I'm here in case you need me. And what happens is that when you're going through a hard time and you're not sure if you're going to get out of it, it feels good knowing that someone else went through it and got out of it. It feels good knowing that there's someone out there that can relate to you so that you're not the only one going through it. So by sharing your stories, what happens is that constantly and consistently doing it will allow you to build a community of people that also believe in your core beliefs. And this allows you to actually have beautiful things like story collaborations. A great example of story collaborations is when you do a podcast episode, two of you get on the microphone together and you exchange beautiful stories that provide value to an audience, which I have to tell you, if you're afraid of speaking on stage or sharing your story in a single format, there's a beautiful opportunity to collaborate with other individuals and share a story as a collective, which gets really beautiful because now you're bringing in two perspectives and pouring it into the ring at the same time.
Mm, mm. I love that. That's See, that's beautiful. Um, so a lot of our members have ventures they're working on where there's a lot of facts and data or statistics that they're gathering as part of their impact story. How do you take and weave some of that in along with the, what did you call them, inspiration stories, highlight stories?
Such a good question. I'm really glad you're taking it this way because I think this was really the next part of what I think is very important, which is you hear this cliche statement, right? And it's become cliche because there's some really big truth to it, which is facts tell but stories sell. And I believe in that vision so much because you think about the fact that there's a lot of people in your life that might have shared some incredible statistics, and they might have been like really, really daring statistics that might have boggled your mind. But over the years of speaking, it's been over a dozen years since I've spoken on stage. And I have to tell you, I still come across people that have met me about the first 3 years of my career, and they don't remember a single takeaway I've given them. They remember a story that was stacked with a takeaway. They'll be like, "Oh, I remember the first time you talked about you talked about the fact that you were running to your job interview and you met with Daryl in the rain," and they'll remember that. But the beautiful thing is, similar to how children's book has done it many years ago, this is a bit on the psychology side. When you think of the boy who cried wolf, when you think about the boy who cried wolf, you kind of know what the takeaway is just by listening to the story. You kind of know, like, okay, I shouldn't have lied or else no one's going to believe me just based on the story. So people don't need to remember the stat. They sometimes just need to remember the story, and the takeaway is stacked along with it. So what I encourage you to do is if you have some daring stats that you need to share, stack it with the story. And it doesn't need to be your story. It just needs to be a story that's relevant to that statistic, and then articulate that to the market. You know, I spent a lot of time in digital marketing, and I can tell you that the biggest mistake I see in content strategies is that most businesses out there, they're sharing features and benefits. They're sharing salesy messages hoping to get the sale. And you see it over and over again. You know, I see this with a lot of real estate agents. They say, you know, buy a house, buy a house, buy a house. I see insurance agents saying, buy my product, buy my product, buy my product. And what happens is people start eliminating that sound. They start turning down the dial. The biggest mistake these individuals are making is that they're forgetting two critical steps in between going from a sale to closing that revenue, which is the fact that the first and most important piece should be sharing content to start a conversation. And that's it. If all you're doing is sharing stories to start a conversation, you'll start realizing that talking about how delicious the cup of coffee is in the morning is sometimes far more important than actually talking about the best feature of your product, because people will be able to create a conversation through that. Or the fact that you were waiting in line and, you know, something crazy happened at a McDonald's lineup while you were waiting there. You know, people will be able to relate to that, which creates a far better relationship with them, which leads to my next step that is usually missing in this formula, which is creating relationships with them. So it's content to conversation to relationship to revenue. And if you do the conversation and relationship correctly, I promise you the revenue comes easy. And this is why the storytelling piece is such a big part of the content strategy. Is if you tell good stories, you're going to start great conversations. So I encourage you to go back to your strategy and think about what type of content can I put out there to start better conversations with my audience. And you'll be amazed with how much easier it is to actually get your impact stories out there to people who actually want to listen to those stories.
I love it. Why do you think it is that people resonate more with stories?
I think at the end of the day, it's the reason why we're there listening every single day, right? Like it's the reason we're on social media on accounts like Facebook and Instagram is actually to enjoy our experience. And it's not enjoyable when someone is out here trying to tell you their favorite product features or why their business is the one that should win against their competitors. What's really fun is actually having that entertainment value. You know, there's a common terminology that we use in the business world. It's called edutain. And you might have heard it, right? Edutain, which is the perfect balance of educating, but at the same time entertaining. And I think we sometimes forget that entertaining component. But when you add a story to the educational factor, it makes a world of a difference. You know, I went to Sheridan College. I remember my favorite teachers. I remember the ones that even if it was at Monday at 8 a.m., I'd be the first one there, and I would be there every single day, even if my weekend was crazy the night before. Why? Because I loved the way that they taught. And what they taught was not just about what's in the textbooks. What they talked about was their personal experiences with the takeaways that they had. You know, I remember my marketing 201 teacher. He would openly talk about how he had a business meeting in Japan the weekend before, and he flew out and he talked about what happened in that meeting. Or he would talk about a funny story with a student that he saw in the hallway. And these are the things that I still remember many years ago, from many years later. And at the end of the day, the way that we think in stories, not statistics. And please hear me loud and clear when I say that. We think in stories. And if we're not able to connect with that way of thinking, we're going to lose our customers' attention, especially if someone out there that offers the same thing that you do is doing a better job telling stories. I promise you that they're going to be able to get that long-term revenue, and you're not going to. So this is why it's absolutely important to be able to connect with your customers and engage to them through storytelling.
So what if you're a scientist or a programmer and you are, you know, blanket statementing, but aren't able to tell the story the same, and you tend to veer toward facts and data because that's your comfort level, perhaps? I mean, I've made a career out of helping people communicate better when it's technology oriented systems, right? Pre-edge. So
yeah, we have clients that are in that space, and the conversation I have with them, which is very, very obvious, but it needs to be said, is I remember them that they're still communicating with human beings, right? It's like my majority of our clients at Candy Box, I would say about 98% of them are B2B. And they also have that hesitation. They're like, oh, we're not trying to be like Starbucks. We're not trying to connect with customers that way. But I remind them, I was like, are your customers people? And I was like, when you go home at the end of the night and you have dinner with your family, are you dropping statistics on the dinner table, or are you still exchanging stories? When you're hanging out with your friends, what are you sharing with them? And they realize very, very quickly that no matter what industry you're in, people want to hear good stories, even if it's about their industry. And this comes back to that piece that I said about building relationships through good conversations. If you're not able to have conversations, especially about things that are not necessarily about your industry, like you got to be okay with having conversations about anything. If you're not able to connect through relatability, you're going to lose your customers. So every single human being, I don't care what industry you're in, if you're supplying your products, your service, or your impact to human beings, it's going to be an absolute necessity to do storytelling. I believe truly that none of us are in B2C or B2B. We are all in H to H, which is we're all in human to human. And the more you understand that, the more you'll understand the importance of storytelling.
So Mufus, I'm going to open it up and see if anybody has questions. Otherwise, we can keep talking all night. Crystal, do you have any?
I love it. And listen, if any of you are daring, okay, I know it's a big ask, but if you're daring to turn on your webcam and join me, sometimes weird seeing only my own face here. So I'd love for all of you to turn on your webcam if you feel comfortable. It just makes me feel a little bit more comfortable being the shy guy that I am. Hello, Jacqueline. Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it. But I would be thrilled to answer any questions. And I want to encourage you to be selfish with your questions. Like, tell me about what your business is. Tell me about who your audience is. Tell me about what you're doing. And I promise you, I will think like an agency, and I'll tell you what I would do if you were my client.
Go, Crystal. I know you want to.
Just like that's a juicy offer. And thank you, Mufus. Thank you, Lisa. Hey, sorry, my sweet little guys rolling around. Okay. Nice to meet you.
We don't hear them.
Yeah, I guess I'll just get the ball rolling. Please, anyone. So hi, I'm a founder of LEOHAN, stands for Living in Our Here and Now. What you say about edutainment, really, I love that, because we're all about creating interactive edutainment for families to bond together. So as an adult, I'm really busy, I'm very ambitious. I love learning, but I found, oh no, my 3 kids all of a sudden were in like an extracurricular activity every single day, and life was too busy. Like, what happened? Why do I have time to spend quality time with them while I'm also learning and growing? So we created LEOHAN. We started off with in-person events. Parent-child would come with a bunch of other parents and their kids, and we do really interesting multisensorial, multidisciplinary activities. And it's just really a way for people to learn what they don't know, to see each other in different lights, and to discover, content, not just from our company, but others as well eventually. So I guess one question I have is, I love this whole concept of telling your stories and how we can have different stories and we can have different audiences in a digital world. When we don't know in advance who is going to see our message, what tips do you have in terms of how do we put out there different content with different themes and not make it seem all over the place? Or are there ways to kind of build cohesion? Do we need to? Any other tips like that when we have, like, again, multiple different stories, multiple different types of audiences that might have different pain points that they gravitate towards?
Such a good question, Crystal, and it's nice to meet you. Crystal, I'm convinced we met somewhere before. I can't put my finger on where, but we've met before, and I got to figure out why. It's bugging me. It's been bugging me since I've been here. But I'll tell you this. There's a couple ways you can approach this. First and foremost, it's important to note that we are living in an era of the multi-hyphenate, and something that I've been hearing used around a lot. And for a very long time, when I heard that terminology, I was like, what on earth does that mean? So I started Googling and looking into it. And the word multi-hyphenate speaks to the fact that it has been more accepted than it's ever been for individuals to have more than one skill set or job titles. And we're seeing that, right? We're seeing that with people today where, I just came out and I said, yeah, I work in marketing, but I also did a book, a podcast, I speak, and I'm sure many of us do as well. With that being said, it's also more accepted than there's ever been for someone to share stories that aren't always boxed into one brand. You often have this fear that people go out there and say, oh, I shouldn't talk about this because it'll look like I have a split personality. Well, your brand doesn't just get seen as a personality anymore. It gets seen as this floating entity of who you are every single day. I think about Elon Musk, and I use Elon Musk as an example because, Elon Musk could have been seen as the car guy, but then he did SpaceX, and he could have been seen as a space guy. Then he dropped a flamethrower for some odd reason and could have been seen as a flamethrower guy. Then he started digging a tunnel in California, and he could have been seen as a tunnel guy, and many other inventions that I don't even know where to start. But they still remember Elon Musk as Elon Musk because at the end of the day, his narrative is not about the product. His narrative is about making the world a better place. So as long as your North Star is consistent, the stories and the things that you put out there can align with that, and it doesn't necessarily need to be down the same lane. So I would think about it that way: is what is that North Star, and are the stories that you're sharing, as different as they may seem from each other, are they still aligned with that North Star? And if it is, that multi-hyphenate opportunity that we have in our culture today will really play out in your favor. The second thing I'm going to point out really quickly is we also have an environment today, such as Facebook groups, Clubhouse rooms. As we know, Clubhouse has really been popping lately. We know about different Instagram communities. I can tell you without a fiber of a doubt that whatever party it is that you're thinking of, that party is already happening right now, probably in Twitter. And what you can do, instead of you trying to start the party, is you can just jump into that party that joins your story. So if you have 3 different topics that are not even close to each other, find the party that's talking about topic 1, then find the party that's chatting about number 2, and then number 3, and then go all out, because that is your crowd anyways. Sometimes you don't need to find your crowd. The crowd is already out there. You're just joining the party and meeting the people and mingling. You don't always need to be the host of the party.
I love that. Don't have to be the host of your own party. Jacqueline, you got anything for us? Tell us about you.
Hi, I finished at Sheridan for marketing last year, awesome. But I came from a different environment. I was a physician previously.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, exactly how he just said, mixing different ideas, and let's see. So why I'm here today, I love this skill of storytelling, and I am taking a look to edit everyone just to try to connect some ideas for entrepreneurship that I have.
Yeah.
Maybe for the near future. So let's see. And
that's awesome.
And then I'm working now in the vaccination clinics and entering Health Canada to help in some papers analysis and decisions. But I kept thinking on some small companies that may have a huge impact in society. So, and as I talked to my first marketing teacher last week, I had another program also related to marketing management from years ago. And I said to her, if I die without doing something for myself as my company, I'll be missing that. So I need to do something. And I'm still not sure which the project will be the first. So I need to decide.
That's so exciting.
That. Yeah.
First of all, congratulations. I mean, that entrepreneurship bug stays itching, and sometimes it's going to lead you to something that you never thought was something you'd want to do. My biggest encouragement to you is the following. First and foremost, I encourage you to keep that curious bug ticking. Like, don't let that curiosity bug go away, because it's that curiosity bug that's going to lead you down the rabbit hole that's going to make you launch something. And you're just going to allow it to speak to you and listen to your mind and your body with the way that it responds. The second thing I encourage you to do is to taste a lot of things. Try a lot of new things. And that's going to allow you to allow that curiosity to being like, maybe I could do it better. Or maybe I should be pursuing this a bit more. I'll give you a quick example. Over the lockdown period, my girlfriend and I, we've been spending a lot of time getting a little bit more introspective. So one of the things that we started doing was we started journaling, and we started doing using a lot of gratitude and productivity journals. And one thing I started realizing very, very quickly is that although the 4 or 5 ones that we tried were pretty good, there wasn't a single one that checkmarked everything I needed. I needed to go to book 1 for some reason and book 2 for another reason. Well, we sat down one day in the car. I pulled out a sheet of paper. I drew out a chart, and I said, let's write down everything we hate about these journals, and let's write down everything we love about these journals, and let's just create the ultimate go-to journal, and see what happens. Well, September 30th, which has just passed, we hosted a launch event of a productivity and gratitude journal that we launched this year that came out of that moment. And it's called Journey to My Best Self. And we did a launch event and it was a massive success, and it's still selling very hard online through social media. And
Awesome.
If you asked me a year ago, journaling wasn't even in the back of my mind. You'll never know when that bug speaks to you. And the best way to do is to taste and try new things. And when it happens, you're really going to invest into it because it was your passion and your decision to do it, not because someone told you to do it because it's a hot trend or you should jump on this bandwagon. You know, you chose to do it out of your passion. And there's just a beautiful motivation behind that that far exceeds following a trend.
Yeah, that's true. And my idea now that I was reading a book my husband gave me the other Christmas, and then I was rereading some parts that I highlighted that said, so there is a sentence that I was looking for that, and then I reread that. It was like, try a little step, just a little step, and go a little one, and another one, and see how it goes. And then you analyze again. Are you enjoying that? Is that what we want or not? It's so risky. What do you think about? Because then if we don't do the first one, we never start, right? So
yeah. You know what? As someone that launched a book, a journal, a podcast, and many client initiatives, let me tell you this. Here's the beautiful thing. Number one, curiosity means you can find the answer to any problem that you have. It's not about necessarily does the answers exist, is are you asking the right questions? You know, when I started my speaking career, I built a website in 1 week. And I was able to do that by YouTubing any problem that I was coming across. You know, you don't have to have the right answer. You just need to take that first step and then make it right. You can always move the needle based on every roadblock that you hit along the way. The second part is you don't need to be an expert at every part of your business. The world is bartering and collaborating more than it's ever have. You know, when I published my first book, I had no idea how to get a book on the shelf. I just had a story to share. And I was able to find a Facebook community. And through the art of bartering, I helped these publishers figure out how to get their book on the shelf and market it. And they helped me figure out how to publish mine. Just by banking on your strengths, you'll be able to actually bring your vision to life without having to do every little step of that vision.
See, that's a story right there.
Yeah, and then a book is another idea. So
well, now you've met the right guy.
It's a labor of love. It's one of the most daunting, painful tasks I've ever done in my life, but it is also the proudest thing I've ever done in my life. Writing a book is no easy feat, but gosh, is it rewarding when you finally get it up on that shelf. I highly encourage you to do it. It's a beautiful experience.
Great. Congratulations. Nice.
Thank you. And congratulations to you. I'm really excited to follow along with your journey. Please do keep giving me updates or being in touch with me, because I'd love to hear what you end up pursuing.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Anybody else have questions for Mufus? Betty, Kate, Chajmina? Okay, Crystal, guess what? You're back to the floor.
Oh my goodness, so many questions, but like, where do you start? Oh, here's one, maybe. I love the Elon Musk example. I don't know if I should get into why. Well, maybe just for fun, since we're sharing stories. You know, I love how he's focused on having this plan B for us as a human species, right? If we can't, let's try to have renewable energy so we don't destroy Earth. And if we destroy Earth, let's have another planet to live in. And I'm like, hey, if we get to another planet, we're still going to mess it up unless if we all learn how to get along, you know, and love each other and appreciate the diversity that we have, not just with ourselves as humans, but also every other living or non-living creature on the planet. So with that, you know, I sometimes say to myself and just some trusted advisors in my team that if we succeed, maybe we'll make Elon Musk, his mission, a little bit irrelevant. I don't say that to most people. It's like, oh, they're like, what are you, nuts? You know, with what kind of work that we do about really sharing stories and making fringe knowledge accessible to people I'm hoping to really change the way we perceive perception itself and the way we perceive knowledge. So having said that, I know when I usually tell people about what we do, they focus on the bonding aspect, right? Okay, that's all that matters. It gets them right here. I can see tears in their eyes. So I would think any sensible business person would say, okay, then just stay there, right? Lead with that. Don't worry about where that North Star is pointing. But there's a big part of me that says, no, but I want to share it. I want people to know. I don't, there's so many reasons why I want people to know what really is my North Star. So I guess that's my question to you, is for those of us who are, a startup, you have to humbly start at this small little seed, and it's just a tiny part of where you want to go. And I could see Lisa's reaction. I know Lisa's like, Crystal, focus. And I get that, focus with the action. But the message, right? As we develop our beta for our web app, because we're focusing on digital now, now that events in person are a bit tricky. Again, I'm like, okay, can I take people through my journey? Can I share this full picture somewhere on the website, for example, and let our audience know? We still lead with the bonding. So my point is, the question, I guess, is there a place, and how is that place? How do we, unpack that bigger story? Thank you so much.
Yeah, I mean, so let me get this out of the way first. Is the beautiful thing about storytelling in today's generation is that it's never a one-time show, right? Like, you always be able to come back and try again if it doesn't work out, right? Like, every talk that I've done, if I didn't feel like it was my best, I don't feel bad about it. I know I can come back maybe even later that day and do it again, right? Same thing with my social media stories. If it didn't hit, hey, I can either delete it or post another one and it'll be fine. The best storytellers in the world, just think about your favorite storytellers in the world, and you're going to realize that they're probably known for one or two main stories in their life. Like, they're probably infamous for that one big story that really took off. And every other story that they've released, which I guarantee you, your favorite storytellers have done hundreds of stories, and it's probably those two that stuck. And that's the game that you're playing. You're not trying to craft the perfect story every time. You're trying to find the hidden gem in all the stories that you share. So you need to feel comfortable with being able to share as many stories as you want, even if it's not always the same focus story that others are telling you to do. Because I got to tell you, the things that have taken off the most in talks that I've done or stories that I've shared are the ones that I least expected to. It always shocks me. And it's kind of like when you go viral, but you can't plan the viral, right? It just happens. And you're like, how did that video take off? And you can't replicate it. It's really that, is you're putting stuff out there knowing that there's something at the right time at the right place to the right person that will make the impact that you want to make. You just need to feel comfortable with putting out there, knowing that there isn't really a downside. Right? There isn't really a downside with sharing different types of stories. It's about the one that's going to stick the most. The other part that's also worth highlighting is sometimes it's not even about your stories. There's another whole opportunity out there, which is your customer stories. The only thing more powerful than you and your mom saying that you're incredible is someone else saying you're incredible. And you want to get that as much as you can. So one thing I would consider, especially with startups, which we've worked with a lot, is actually focus grouping first. Right? Getting it out there, getting some user testing, getting some feedback, but being very strategic in the feedback, where not only do you get some initial feedback and thoughts about how to better your app or you better your product, but also a story and a testimonial. When we did the journal case, when we released our journal, we actually did a focus group with about a dozen people in the world of personal development. And we've given them a journal. We let them try it for a week. And then I had them fill out this form. But the very last question in that form was, we would love to showcase you and your story on our social media and marketing. Do you mind writing one paragraph, letting us know about your experience with it, and letting them actually share that story? The beautiful thing is, number one, by writing that paragraph, they've already given you the go ahead, like, go ahead and share it. That's why I'm writing it. But secondly, you're letting them say it in their own words, and they go over and beyond when you give them that opportunity. Like, some people are dying to talk about how incredible you are. You just never given the platform to. So what you're doing here is you're really giving them the microphone in the most virtual way possible. And those are the stories you want to surface, where now it's no longer about you talking about your greatest moments, but it's others sharing that as well. So keeping your ears to the streets and listening to what others are saying is a great way to tell better stories.
I find it interesting that you had people write their wonderful you paragraphs, their testimonials. I find it interesting you had them write it, because a lot of people these days would say, well, it's better if it's on video and then you can transcribe it. So why that way?
I just find that writing is sometimes better because they may not conveniently be available when you want them to. You know, people get a little self-conscious about turning on the camera when they're in their PJs and maybe on a bad hair day, right? Like, but writing is like they can decide when they want to write it. They can revisit it if they didn't like the way they said it. And I find that it does very, very well. But the other part too is that you can be very strategic with how they write the testimonial. You know, a bad strategy is going out there and saying, "Hey, can you give us a quote to use?" Because what that's going to do is it's going to give you so many different types of format that it seems inconsistent, and it's not actually a story you're getting a testimonial. There's a big difference between a customer testimonial and a customer story. To get the perfect story, you actually want to ask lead in story questions. You want to ask about what their experience was like in the past, what their pain points were, why they decided to finally switch, why they finally decided to try out your product or your service for the first time. What was it about it? What was their first experience like? And really diving into those emotional part, right? You talked about shedding tears a second ago, Crystal. It's like, why? I don't like, I'm not shedding the tear. So I clearly haven't heard the story. So what is it about that made them shed a tear? And I feel like there's just a lot there that you can get out of them, but they just haven't been asked the right question. By asking them to write you a review, they're going to take a very Amazon type approach to it, and they're going to only focus on the product, when the reality is if you've impacted them in a far better way than just the product, and you're by giving them lead-in questions, you can really get that out of them.
So I have a question around the energy in which you tell the story. You know, a lot of us get kind of up in our heads as entrepreneurs. You know, maybe feeling like when we see someone like you, or even Crystal, who has this like very energetic way of telling a story, and then there's, you know, the slower talkers like me. So I guess the question I have would be, do you think the way you tell the story matters? Because I mean, I know I would get up in my head and go, well, I should be more energetic like Mufus, so I'm more interesting. I should be more enthusiastic like Crystal, so that I'm, you know, sort of that self comparison thing, and then stopping yourself from speaking up.
My very first secret is the extra giant mug of caffeine that I drink before every event, which I'm sure plays a big role in the amount of energy that I have, which immediately tends to run out as soon as the event ends. So that definitely is a plus. But I'll tell you this, the energy that I have in me comes a lot more out of my like nerdy passion of this topic, and then actually my way of communicating. Like, I'm so deadly passionate about this that I just geek out when we talk about it, and my energy level just seems to spike. But I also notice that when I'm at conferences and I'm speaking, I'm never really the funniest person in the room. I'm not the one that's making the audience go nuts and flip out based on how hilarious the person is on stage. And I've come to peace with that the moment that I realize that there's no one in the world that's looking for another Kevin Hart or another Oprah or another speaker that already exists, right? Like, there's already a Tony Robbins today. They've already seen it. There's already a high energy Gary Vaynerchuk out there. They've already seen it. So I've realized that no one's out there trying to find the second Gary Vaynerchuk or the second Tony Robbins. They're trying to find the first you. They're trying to find that breath of fresh air that they haven't found before. And that comes out of the unique personality that you have. If everyone was high energy, I would actually be practicing how to not be high energy just so I could stand out, right? It's more important to figure out how to be unique in your own being. And my uniqueness came out of storytelling and being excessively passionate about it. But you know, so there's a lot of speakers out there that does an incredible job capturing attention with not even half the amount of energy that I have, is because their style of and speaking actually makes me jealous. Like, I wish I could articulate the way they do sometimes. So banking on what you're good at and being your own unique being will get you far further than trying to be the second version of someone that already exists.
I love that. The second version of someone that already exists. You know, it's funny, all the years that I was speaking and doing workshops and webinars and all that, sharing the stage with some people who had pretty big names, at least in the Canadian marketplace, and it always shocked me how these people were, in many cases, quite introverted. So I'm going to circle back to that and say, like, how is it that people get over that?
Lisa, I'll be honest, I don't think you ever do get over that. and the introvert in me still speaks very heavy. I have a rule of thumb that I only do one session per day, without ever overbooking myself. So there's another session that I have later this week, and I have a morning session, and someone was trying to book me later in the evening to do another talk. And although it was open, and although it might have been financially lucrative for me to take it, I turned it down because I knew that I couldn't give 100% to that event. I have to respect my energy level. So the first thing that's extremely important is to realize that there's things in the world that are energy boosters and energy drainers, and they're different for every one of us. And when you start realizing what that is for you, start paying attention to how you stack your day. Because if you have too many of your energy drainers in one day, it will really take a toll on you. And as we're hearing being talked about a lot in this world, we're hearing quite a bit about burnout being a significant topic. And I think burning out is happening because we're underestimating the amount of and the little energy that we have in this world and how it takes a toll on us. So pay attention to your body is the best answer. There isn't one answer that fits all. It's about trying things out. And as I was saying earlier to Jacqueline, is to really taste things, try it out, see how it feels to you, and then based on that, make a decision. As high energy as I am in this environment, I burn out. I absolutely deplete my energy by the end of the session. Like, I just know that's going to happen. And because of that, I don't book anything after that. So be respectful for your energy, and remember that it's a game of longevity, not a sprint. It's not about how fast you can get there. It's how long you can run. And it's important to figure out the best way to sustain that energy level for many years.
Interesting you say that. I know that whole paying attention to energy and only speaking once a day kind of thing. So what happens if you're in a sales situation and you know, have that great sales opportunity, and the only time they can meet is that afternoon, and you already have a big presentation in the morning?
You know what? I'm fortunate now that we're a team of 30 that I won't be put in the situation ever where if I don't go, the meeting drops. Like, there's flexible abilities through delegation now, which I didn't have once upon a time, but I still wouldn't. Like, I think more important than the big sale is your energy, because I may get that sale, but I may not even be able to deliver on the promise because of the fact that I don't have the energy to sustain that sale. I think it's more about being able to deliver. I always believe that the experience and the test doesn't start when it doesn't stop when you close the sale. It just starts. So closing that sale means now I got to really think about how to plan things out. So I would my work calendar is the exact same way as the example that I just gave you with speaking, which is I only book a specific number of meetings a day. And even if I could have booked more and it would have been more convenient for my week, I know I've been in Candy Box for a decade and I haven't burnt out. I must have figured something out, right? And I think there's something to it, is when you start figuring out what your calendar can look like, you can only decide, like, can you take on 4 meetings a day? Probably, but Daryl, I know, can take on 10 meetings a day. He's got a far better, higher energy level than I do. So figuring that out different for each unique being really matters. Yeah, everyone is truly different.
You just want to make sure you're in your zone, whatever it is. So what are you saying, Crystal? You're saying,
overly energetic when you speak in front of others? Yes. Crystal, you and I are so much alike. It's insane. Like, it does make a world of a difference that people get shocked. I sometimes worry I disappoint people because they see me energetic on stage and then we hang out and they're like, you're a disappointment. You're not that guy at all. But it's like, I'm done. Like, I'm out of energy. Sure. So I know exactly what you're going through. There's a really, really well-known concept out there. It's called the Yerkes-Dodson law. And I encourage every single one of you to look at it. It's Yerkes-Dodson law, which is strangely pronounced, so I typed it out there. What it does is it shows you a beautiful visual of the difference between challenge and performance. And when you think about a challenge and a performance graph, the naive individual like myself, I would think that the easier the challenge, the more productive, right? Like, as long as you keep giving me easy challenges, I'll be at my peak performance. But what they realized through this study is that it's actually not the case. It's actually more like a bell curve. It's only in the middle that you find that you're at your peak performance. And if you think why that's the case, it's very similar to what video game developers and businesses have figured out in the past, which is if you make it too easy, people start getting bored. If you make it too difficult, people start getting stressed. So you have to find that middle level. It shouldn't be too easy. It should be an environment where it's difficult first and you learn to get better over time. And that's one thing that Yerkes-Dodson law has done a really good job really illustrating in a beautiful graph that I encourage all of you to take a look at. But if you can find that middle ground that's unique to you and you play in that middle ground, which is your peak performance, you can run as long as you want and you will not burn out. It's very difficult to maintain that because life changes and circumstances happen, but I promise you it's something that's very doable.
Love it. So I want to hear the story, the story of inspiration for you. The you know, who inspires you, and what books inspire you?
So I'm a massive book nerd. Let me start with that and work backwards. I have an Audible account that I share with my girlfriend, and every single month when we get that 1 token a month subscription that I have, we sit down and we say, what do we want to learn this month? And I download a book, and I get through about 2 books a month because of that, because I'm listening to it on the road. And Jacqueline, to your point about staying curious, that's a great way to taste things because you're always learning something. And sometimes the back of your mind will be like, okay, this is a really good idea I learned in the book and I can do something about it. My big inspiration, and I have to give huge kudos to our own very much CEO, Daryl Keyser, CEO of Candybox, Daryl Keyser, who's also a business Hall of Famer at Sheridan College, who started the company Candybox Marketing. You know, before I got hired, I was a failing student that was serving coffee for a living that had nothing to show, no marketing experience, and he took a chance on me. And he took a chance on me as much as I took a chance on him. You know, he was a new company, didn't have any staff members, didn't even have an office, but just by meeting him and understanding what his character is like, I very much knew he was someone I wanted to work with. And it's been 10 years that I've worked with, and I can tell you without a doubt that he's still that same human being that I met on the first day. And the story that I share that I told you very briefly about me running to the job interview was that I came across Daryl's profile on LinkedIn, and I sent him a message asking him for an opportunity to meet with him over a cup of coffee. And he messaged me back, and he instantly asked for my phone number. And on this phone number, he said, can you meet in 20 minutes at this Starbucks location that I'm in? And at that time in my life, I got to tell you, I had no money in my pocket. Like I couldn't even get a cab to go down there. I didn't have a car. And I knew just with a gut feeling that I had to take this meeting. I don't know why, you know, this was there was no promise of a job. It was just a coffee meeting. But I said, you know what? I'm not going to make excuses. And instead, what I did is I looked in my closet, I pulled out my favorite running shoes, and I decided to go for a run and try to get to the Starbucks on time. It was the worst weather you could possibly ask for on a run. It was storming outside. As a matter of fact, by the time I arrived, I was drenched. But I thought it was going to work in my favor because it would make me look like I'm sweating and I'm desperate for a job. You know, like I thought maybe it'll work out in my favor. And we sat down and we chatted, and it was the best sprint that I've ever made in my life because it was that conversation that made him take a chance on me. And because of that, I'm 10 years in the making at Candybox. And his leadership every step of the way has really allowed me to become the marketer that I am. So without a doubt, Daryl Keyser is one of the biggest inspirations, if not the biggest inspirations I've had in the space.
He is pretty inspiring, and just big heart on him, for sure. Anybody else? Any other questions? I don't want to take the whole floor. Okay, Mufus, if you were looking at this group, and I'm gonna, let me see. Who do I know on the group? Betty Franklin. I happen to know what her venture is about. Betty, can you speak up? Is it okay if we pick on you for a minute? Are you in a position to be able to talk? Betty?
Maybe just listening today. That's
Okay,
okay.
maybe she is. Well, she runs a organization that is.
I'm here.
Okay,
I'm
perfect.
here.
Oh, there we go. Hello, Betty.
Oh, I'm multitasking. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. It's dinner time. I know for a lot of people, they make dinner while they're listening in.
My look. Okay.
You look fabulous. So I'm going to pick on you for a minute because I know that you are building a pretty cool organization focused on mental health for nurses
Yeah.
and frontline healthcare workers. Do you want to talk a little bit about it for a minute? Tell us a story about it.
Tell you a story. Okay. It is 1 o'clock in the morning, February 1997, and I'm driving home from work. I was partway through a 12-hour night shift, and I knew I couldn't do it anymore. I was afraid if I kept working, I may hurt one of my patients. So I called my supervisor, told her I had needed to leave. And the next day I landed up at my doctor's office. He sent me to a psychiatrist who asked me a bunch of questions and then diagnosed me with major depression and anxiety. And I was embarrassed. I didn't tell anybody about my illness except for my husband, my doctor, and my work. Anyway, that led me on a journey of learning, learning about myself, learning about more. Why did I get sick? Why did I get sick with mental illness? Why couldn't it have been cancer or heart disease? Because at least then people will respond differently to me. And that was the root of what I do now. In time, I developed workshops. I wrote a book. I called it GUTS. It stands for Get Uncomfortable to Succeed. And I talk about the F words, the 6 F words of health and well-being: family, fitness, friends, finance, fun, and safe. And when I got sick, all of those things in my life were so out of balance, and they are all related to human needs. And when our needs aren't being met, our body responds. And mine responded with mental illness. Other people can respond with various other illnesses. And from that, I built like the program that Lisa's talking about, Mastering My Mental Fitness for Nurses, because studies have shown, various studies have shown that nurses are dealing with a silent illness, and they're not talking about it. So if we do not have healthy healthcare workers to care for us, how can we, the general population, be healthy? So, okay, there. I don't know if that's a good story or.
Mufus, any advice?
Betty, you are the type of person that I wish I knew when I was younger and I needed that assistance. I can't tell you how incredible it is that you've kind of gone through something and saw that it wasn't there for you, so you decided to be that person. I think that's such a beautiful thing, and thank you so much for sharing that story with me. I can't tell you how great it is just to hear someone really be able to step up based on the need that you needed. I think it's so rare to hear that. And how's it going, Betty? How's the initiative going so far? Tell me some of the things that you're doing. I'd love to learn more about this.
So Lisa and Lisa's known my story for quite some time, and it was through Lisa's encouragement that I joined the RISE, that I applied for the RISE program, because I have a product, and I have a good product, and I have a book and I have workshops and that, but it's the marketing of it and the fully monetizing of it. So we had a meeting with McMaster University today. It was probably our 4th meeting. They brought on more people. Can they take this, our program, like we're looking at Train the Trainer? Is this something that they can offer to their nursing students or to other health sciences professionals? We have a meeting with the Region of Peel. How do we tap into funding for these programs? Another health organization I was talking to this morning, and they have a fair bit of interest in it. So, but through RISE, with RISE and with the coaches, okay, what does a contract look like? What's a good price to charge for what I'm doing? So I'm getting the contact and building more the entrepreneurial aspect of the program. and to get it out there. My big fat, a BHAG, big hairy audacious goals is that it becomes part of, like, how they have that participation program that why can't they have something like the DUT program or the F-word program and talk about all those things that instead of the symptoms in healthcare, why don't we talk about the roots and give people help with it? Like, who goes to a doctor and talks about their saying that they're bankrupt or they're not making ends meet? And who goes to a doctor and says they're living with, not many would say they're living with an alcoholic and living with various other abuse. But they say they have a headache or that the joints are sore and the stomach upset and they can't sleep. So anyway, so we're making progress, and thanks for being on that I'm in RISE, and I welcome what you said about telling your stories, especially stories of failure. And I think I can tell a number. I have a number of those.
Betty, I only wish I had like 8 hours to tell you some things that you could do, because I'm such a big fan of the initiative, and I've worked with a lot of organizations in the mental health space, so I can't tell you how much it's very close to me. I'll tell you this as a quick tidbit, and please know that the conversation doesn't need to end at the end of this session. Just reach out to me if you want to dive in further, because this is something that's very close to me as well. When I started using Clubhouse for the first time, for those of you that are wondering, Clubhouse is an audio-only app that allows you to join a room kind of like this, and you're all speaking through an audio platform, and it replicates what could have been like speaking on stage and people are in the audience listening to you. You can actually do that in a Clubhouse environment. One of the things that shocked me was there are tons of communities that are really opening and resurfacing these big conversations around mental health. There's tons of clubs, as they call it, which is the equivalent of like a Facebook group. Tons of clubs out there that are constantly, hour by hour, hosting sessions and bringing individuals like yourself to get up there and share some thoughts, which the audience size goes anywhere from 20 to about 1,000 people per session. It's quite phenomenal. I would love for you to first take a look at Clubhouse just to see if that's something that piques your interest. But if you have any questions about how to break into Clubhouse, I've done a lot of that over the last year. I'd love to share some thoughts with you, but a Clubhouse is a golden opportunity when you think about the growth of audio platforms. When we have this big need right now of better conversations, which is something that I've been pushing myself as a podcast host, which is we need better conversations in this world. Clubhouse, I would say, is the best platform on this earth today that allows you to have better conversations in the easiest way possible. So I encourage you to take a look at that, and more importantly, I encourage you to reach out to me if you need any assistance with getting into that, because I love what you're doing, and I think the world needs to hear more of your story.
Betty, I had to mute you just because you had a lot of background noise, but go ahead.
Sorry.
It's okay. Go ahead.
His email. How do I reach out to Lisa?
Mufus, how do we reach out to you?
Betty, what is your most active platform? My email, when I'm at an agency for 10 years, my email is my work and my personal email. Like, I don't have a separate email anymore. I've been too long. So to avoid like it being blended with all client emails, if you use LinkedIn or Instagram, I think those are my go-to platforms. But if not, let me know. I'm pretty much on any social media, so I can accommodate whatever you use. But I would rather use that in email so that you don't get lost in all the client noise there.
Thank you.
So we're coming to the end of the session. Any further questions for Mufus? I'll give you just a minute.
I want to hear from Emma Jo Ford, which is a solid name. And I want to hear from Bucky. We haven't heard anything from those two, but I hope you got some value. Thank you so much for being here nonetheless.
I wanted to ask, as a new entrepreneur, what advice do you have when, starting out, as far as getting the message across potential clients or, people in general?
I can give you a general answer, but if you have a business that you're working on, I'd rather give you an answer that matters more to you. Do you want to share a little bit about what you're working on right now? Sorry, Bucky, did we lose you?
I think we lost your audio, Bucky.
Hello?
There you
Yeah,
are.
I can hear you now. Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm gonna try leaving because my internet is being faulty right now and everybody's frozen. I don't know if you guys can hear me.
We can hear you. Can you
We
hear
can
us
hear
now?
you just fine, yeah.
You're good.
Oh,
Nope. Unfortunate. Okay.
we put her on the spot.
Yeah, that never works out. I know this is being recorded, so if I could just maybe answer her question on the recording, and that could be revisited later, maybe that'll be helpful. She
Sure.
asked, "Hey, as a new entrepreneur, where do I start?" I think first and foremost, I encourage you to start by building your own personal brand. And the personal brand starts with your name being the brand that you focus on. And as the result of that, you're spending all your time marketing your story and your vision. Because what that allows you to do is that you can start sharing stories that exceed the business. You know, you can share personal stories that matters to you. I mentioned that I'm in the marketing industry, but I also broke into the author, and I broke into the podcast, and I broke into the speaking industry, and now I broke into the productivity industry. The only reason I could do that is because Mufus is the brand, not the product that I was releasing. So if you start as an entrepreneur, Bucky, I know you just popped back in, but I'm answering the question so you could watch it in a recording later if you need to. But the answer to your question is to focus on building your own personal brand. And you do that by sharing stories that really matter to your core belief. And you can do that using any social media platform that you feel comfortable with. I started as a blogger, but somewhere down the road, I started using Instagram as my go-to funnel. So figure out a platform that works for you and just spend all that time sharing your core beliefs. And over time, you'll be able to attract the right community. That's where I would start. The business initiative, I talked about my journal launch party that we just had. That was a great success. I'll tell you this, about 99% of the people that were at that launch party, which there was over a couple hundred, 99% of them were not actually people that cared about my journal. They just knew who I was and they wanted to support the initiative. And that will happen more often than not if you just invest and pour into the community. So I think there's a huge opportunity to be able to connect and build a community first. And if you build a community, the initiatives that you roll out over and over again, they'll be consistently successful, similar to how a friend would come out and support your business as well.
So I have a
second that.
question.
Sure.
If we don't have something from the chat, I don't mind.
No, go ahead.
So you said that you launched it on Instagram, was your main platform, right? And then, so you have now, do you have now one professional or your brand personal, one brand profile on LinkedIn, on Instagram, and your personal one? You did that differently, or you started acting differently when you decided to promote your brand, your personal brand? And the other question is about Clubhouse and Instagram. If we can do also the videos, recordings, and meetings live on Instagram. Why choose them the Clubhouse? What are the difference between them?
Sure. So let me rapid fire that really quickly. You got two great questions here. The first question, the answer to whether or not you do a personal account or a business account really comes down to your capability of managing multiple accounts, right? Like, I think if you're able to manage a business account and a Jacqueline account, I would say go for it, because there's a lot of value in being able to build two different types of audience. For example, we have a candy box marketing account. I also have a journal account, but I also have a Mufus account, because when it comes to speaking on stage and doing podcasting, I am the brand, not the topic, right? So I have to think about who I want to be in that situation. However, I'll tell you this, almost every single person that comes and tells me that they're going to open up two accounts always drops the ball on one of them, because they realize that it's a lot more work than they thought it was. So I would encourage you to start with one. Maybe when you feel comfortable with the platform, or you found your rhythm or a system that's sustainable, then start opening another one, because if the other one doesn't do well, you can always just shut it back down and go back to your main one, but always have that main one running no matter what. And because if I believe that someone like myself, I believe in launching initiatives every single year. I try to launch as many as I can. The beautiful thing is if one initiative fails, it doesn't mean that my whole program shuts down. I just drop that initiative and move to the next one. I've had, I told Lisa I've had many failure stories, and some of those are tied in with big initiatives that didn't take off. I just dropped it and moved to the next one. But because people invest in who I am and my vision, they continue supporting and riding that wave with me. They don't just abandon me because that one product didn't work. If your entire account is on that one business or that one product, if that if that product no longer exists, you lose the audience too. I recommend having that people tagging along with you. To answer your second question very quickly, Instagram does have capabilities of doing similar things like Instagram Live, but if you try Clubhouse, you'll understand what I mean, which is very difficult to answer verbally, which is their platform is set up to be able to attract a very organic, large crowd without you needing a following. So you could have 2 followers and you can still bring in 500 people into a room, because that's just the way Clubhouse has built their algorithm, where if you're speaking about mental health, as the example we just spoke about, it will actually alert people that are in the world of mental health without them being your followers. So when it comes to exposure, as someone maybe that's a startup that doesn't have a big audience, it's a great way to get yourself out there before you have a big following.
Great, thank you. Got that. Thank you.
Oops, sorry. So I just wanted to thank you so much, Mufus, for being here. This has been a hugely valuable session. I know when I think about the tools you gave us, especially early in the session with the inspiration stories, the highlight stories, the failure stories, and then just sharing your own stories has been hugely valuable. We so appreciate it. I know that for many of our ventures here and for the people who are considering a venture, certainly lots of great information and help you gave us in being able to tell our impact story better or differently. So we so appreciate that value that you provided tonight. And I know that when you do anything, you do it with 100% and you give your heart 100%. So we appreciate all the heart you brought to this event tonight.
Lisa, that means a lot. And thank you, Edge, for having me. Again, your initiative and what you do for even as an incubator for entrepreneurs, I think is a beautiful system. And I thank you for even giving me an opportunity to share. And now that I've heard a little bit about many of you, I'll be keeping up with your journey, and please to continue sharing and passing along your updates to me. The relationships I build on events like these don't end at the event. I promise you there'll be a lot more collaborations and insights coming up in the future. So thank you again for having me. It's been a fantastic experience.
Thanks so much for being here, everybody. We appreciate you. We run these events for you. They're meant to be an opportunity for you to ask your questions and be part of the session. So as much as Mufus was here and offering his time and heart, you brought yours to the table too. So thank you for that. Have a great night.
Take care, everyone.